Hi everyone. My name is Jerry Wise, and I'd like to talk to you today about the ways in which narcissistic rage causes trauma. Not only am I going to talk about the rage and how it causes trauma, I also want to talk about how do we begin to change that. And one of the ways I want to introduce today is we will have to learn to change our emotional location and change our emotional intensity. By the way, when I say emotional location, I'm not talking about physical distance. I'm talking about where and how I'm seeing something in relation to a system or to a relationship. Because when we experience narcissistic rage and are traumatized by that, what happens to the emotional location is we go like that. We enmesh with the abuser and with the narcissist. And we internally enmesh. We may not get any closer than where we were. We're still living in the house, but emotionally, we become bonded to them. And that's part of emotional location. And so to heal that, we have to change that emotional location. And then secondly, emotional intensity, which I'm going to mention here also, which I think is important. When there is that trauma, our emotional system, our amygdala, and everything goes on high alert and stays at a very high level many times for the rest of our lives, unless we begin to deal with that and recover from that. So emotional location, emotional intensity. I'll be talking more in a moment. Let's talk about how does rage then cause this trauma? Or some people would say narcissistic rage can cause CPTSD. It certainly can. First of all, it's the emotional intensity of the rage. Rage is highly intense, an overwhelming emotion. We then feel frightened, helpless, maybe completely out of control when this rage is going on. And if you've ever witnessed someone raging, which is why we sometimes watch TV and the news and we'll see that happening. And many people are re-traumatized as a result of seeing that rage. And so because of the high intensity, this creates trauma. It interrupts our selfhood. When we are traumatized, trauma interrupts selfhood and being a self. It bonds us to something that's not self. And that's why rage is so difficult. Also, many times when there's emotional rage event, we are pulled into abandoning ourselves. Well, because if you're a kid and your parent is raging, how are you going to stay yourself? I understand kids are not fully developed. They're not a full self. And I understand all that developmental stuff. But what I'm saying is, if someone's raging at you, how do you maintain a sense of self? Especially when you're a child. That traumatizes us. Because, again, as I mentioned, emotional intensity causes greater enmeshment with rage. And it's enmeshment with the rage, the dysfunction, the abnormal levels of anxiety. And so we then get calibrated to a higher emotional level. Number 2, fear and threat. Rage involves aggressive behavior, threatening behavior. And when you're witnessing, if you're a kid witnessing a narcissistic rage, and there, I know adults who experience narcissistic rage from a sibling or from a parent. They may be 40 years old and still can experience narcissistic rage from someone in the family. And parents, if they're raging at their children, even as they're adults, that already tells me they're way out of whack on their emotional location and way out of whack on their emotional intensity. And if they don't deal with those two things in their recovery and healing, they're probably just going to keep recycling the same problem over and over and over again. So when we experience rage and we see that and witness it, then our bodies turn into fight or flight. Or fight or flight or fawn. In other words, just keep your head down. Just be quiet. Just act like nothing. Act like nobody. Act invisible. whatever we need to do. And then there's a whole bunch of stress hormones that get released at that point, which then can cause physical and psychological distress as a result of rage. And when we've grown up with a narcissist who rages, our amygdala, that triggering part of our brain, becomes overloaded and over-triggered. And we have that amygdala hijack. And it's kind of always on the edge of being hijacked. So as soon as someone starts getting a little louder, or maybe someone gets angry, it starts going off and going, whoa, 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 hold on. And we are reactive mode often. Thirdly, loss of safety. When you have safety stripped from you, that's traumatizing. Our security is violated. Narcissistic rage shatters our sense of safety. And then we feel like we're always in constant danger. People will talk about it as being like sharing the same cell with a lion or a tiger. And you're just always on guard and always waiting to be attacked, or you feel very unsafe. So in the recovery part of that for us, we have to really begin to look at lowering our anxiety. And I don't mean just your nervousness, though that could be a part of it, but I mean the deep systems anxiety that we've gotten from our family of origin or from the narcissist. And if you have that loss of safety, plus you have chronic systems anxiety from the emotional system and intergenerational trauma, now we have all of this anxiety to have to deal with. Many people deal with this part, but don't deal with that part. And so I think oftentimes if you deal with this part, it can improve this part. This part can affect that part, but I like dealing with the chronic long-term anxiety that we experienced from our family of origin. I think it's a real place of real healing that many people don't often address. Fourthly, the psychological impact of narcissistic rage. If you experience narcissistic rage, again, it can lead to symptoms of PTSD, CPTSD, and that's where we have flashbacks, nightmares, severe anxiety, as well as difficulties with trust and emotional regulation. If I've experienced someone being so totally unregulated emotionally, and that's narcissistic rage, that's unregulated emotionality, in some ways it is contagious. Now, you may become angry, an angry person. You may find yourself raging. That's possible. But what it also does for a majority of people who experience that is that now I'm not regulated on the inside. I'm always standing on a basketball with a flat board and standing on it and trying not to fall off. And I just keep standing on that ball, hoping not to fall. And that's how my emotional system works. It's just been pulled out of its steadying anchor when we experience narcissistic rage. Then a lot of people have CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder from narcissistic rage. And then how can we trust anybody? And if you move into how can I trust anybody, see, I've now just moved my emotional location. That's a part of my emotional location. And again, we'll talk more. And we oftentimes also experience that we don't trust ourselves. When I have my trust broken by other people, usually I'm a victim of that, of myself as well. I don't trust them, and I don't trust me. Now we have a real problem because we've broken trust with others and we've broken trust with me. That becomes a real problem for healing and becoming a real self. And of course, that would take self-focus, self-care, self-love, self-acceptance. Learning self-trust are the ways out. And I think there are ways to do that effectively. Number 5, physical health. If you're exposed to chronic rage and you can have physical experiences from that with increased stress level, and we know people, I remember working as a chaplain for a long period when I was in seminary, and that was a required couple of semesters that had to be done. And I learned so much about the connection between physical symptoms and spiritual and emotional difficulties. And certainly people had had very traumatic backgrounds with narcissists or other dysfunctional families, heart problems, weakened immune system, gastrointestinal problems. It really can affect us on a physical level if we've experienced that. That's why I think recovery is so important. And so resolving our family of origin issues can truly improve our health, and getting our families out of us and their toxicity and enmeshment and dysfunctional ways of viewing the world and dysfunctional ways of viewing us can help tremendously in our body finding lowered inflammation, lower anxiety, lower stress, and probably we would be healthier as a result. Number 6, interpersonal relationships. How does narcissistic rage cause problems for interpersonal relationships? Well, if it involves rage, then we have the difficulty of trust becomes an issue. Well, that's a relationship issue. If, when are they going to come out? When is the lion going to wake up and come and eat me? And we have that going into a relationship. That's not going to work out well. If we have we're waiting on the lion to wake up and eat me, that's going to be a problem. Trust issues, emotional intimacy issues. How close can I get to people? And then we'll find ourselves being over close and then not close enough. Over close and then not close enough. Those are the kinds of polarity problems that we have from our emotional location as a result of narcissistic rage. And we'll swing back and forth between those two, and then we wonder, why are my relationships working very well? Because I'm not working very well. I'm not saying you're lazy or you don't care, you're not trying. I'm just saying your internal system, gyroscope, way of seeing things is not functioning in a healthy way because of the trauma that you had experienced. And then we develop the whole relationship risk problem, that every relationship is a risk and it's going to turn out badly. People can't be trusted. Intimacy must just be transactional. That way I don't get ripped off or taken or abused. It can't be unconditional because, again, the other shoe's going to drop. And then rage maybe has become a part of our normal as a result of narcissistic rage. By that, a parent being narcissistically rageful in a family, and we grew up with that, then rage or anger may be normal. We may go, well, it's not good, and I realize that, but it's something people do in our lives. And it's kind of, we have too much tolerance for it. Maybe that's a way to say it. We grow up with too much tolerance. That's not the same as if I talk to people who grew up in a narcissistic home, they had narcissistic rage foisted on them, and I go, oh, do you think narcissistic rage is good or normal? Of course they say, well, no, of course not. But we still have this internal sense that that's kind of what some people do, and you just have to kind of deal with that. No, we don't want to deal with that. We really don't. That's not okay. Number 7, repeating patterns. When we've been a victim of narcissistic rage, it traumatizes us, and then we can have a cycle of anger or a cycle of abuse. We can even become abusive unknowingly. And I know many parents who experience narcissistic abuse, they would come very close to being abusive to their kids, or they might have crossed the lines And they absolutely hated it. Because they could see how much it was a similar pattern to when they were growing up. I don't think judgment's important. I think responsibility and appropriateness is important, and healing. And when we get traumatized by narcissistic rage, we can begin to have trouble with rage and anger ourselves. And I think some people can even have trouble with anger or rage if it's all stuffed down and never addressed. And I know with the people that I've dealt with over the years, and I've dealt with some severe people who have been really difficulties with rage. That's not everyone. And helping them move rage to anger so they could actually handle it and process it better. Because rage is just not processed. Rage is just that primal madness that comes out. Anger is something we can process or talk about. So I would work on helping them turn it into anger. I didn't say go do anger on everybody. I'm saying let's turn that into something we can process. Number 8, guilt and shame. If you've been raged at by somebody, anybody, but particularly a parent, you think we're going to feel internal feelings of shame and guilt? Exactly. Why did I make them so angry? What have I done that's so wrong? I must have caused this. They're the adult. They know what's best. Gosh, I must be a really bad kid. And we end up internalizing that shame and guilt. Rage is something that minimizes and reduces other people. Rage is to overwhelm the other person by the expression of uncontrolled and unregulated emotion. And then we end up having a trauma bond often with those who are narcissistically raging, and we have a trauma bond in that way. And we may never see that person again and still have a trauma bond. And so those are some things that will need addressing and healing. When talking about emotional location, emotional intensity, I do want to mention a program that I think would be excellent, because I do talk about healing in these ways in the program listed below in the description, Your New Road to Self. You also get a year's worth of group coaching with me live once a month for a year. And I believe that changing intensity, location, your vantage point, your perception point, the distance and closeness you have emotionally in relationships, and the level of self-differentiation and self-definition can go a long way to healing trauma from narcissistic abuse. I hope you'll subscribe, like, and comment on this video. I want to thank you for watching, and have a great day, and be wise.